Australia has been hit from space more times than almost any other landmass on Earth. Not because the continent is unusually large, though it is. Not because its position on the planet makes it a more frequent target, because orbital mechanics does not work that way. But because Australia is geologically the oldest and most stable continental surface on the planet, and geological stability is what preserves impact craters. On continents subject to active tectonics, mountain building, volcanic resurfacing, and the rapid erosion that comes with high rainfall and complex river systems, impact craters are destroyed. The geological processes that continuously reshape those landscapes obliterate the evidence of impacts over millions of years. A crater that formed 100 million years ago in a geologically active landscape is gone. Subducted, buried, eroded, or so modified by subsequent geological events that it is no longer recognizable. The ancient, stable, flat, dry surface of Australia does not destroy its craters. It keeps them. Australia currently has 31 confirmed impact craters on its territory, the third highest number of any country in the world. The actual number of craters that have occurred on Australian territory across geological time is orders of magnitude higher. Most are too ancient and too eroded for any surface trace to remain. What the 31 confirmed structures represent is the subset of Australia's impact history that is recent enough and well enough preserved to be confirmed by the physical evidence that modern scientific methods require. And what scientists have found inside those craters when they looked carefully goes significantly beyond the standard geological account of a hole made by a rock falling from space. Not at one crater. At multiple craters across the continent, representing different ages, different sizes, and different geological settings, the research has produced a consistent pattern of findings that the individual site accounts do not assemble into a coherent picture. This is that picture. If you are new here, this channel covers Australian history, science, and country that most people were never properly taught. Subscribe now and let me know in the comments below how many of Australia's impact craters you had heard of before watching this video today. Let us start with the diversity of what Australia's confirmed craters represent. Because the 31 confirmed structures span an extraordinary range of age, size, geological setting, and state of preservation that makes the collection as a whole one of the most scientifically valuable records of impact history on the planet. The oldest confirmed impact structure in Australia is the Yarrabubba crater in Western Australia, which at 2.229 billion years old is the oldest confirmed impact structure anywhere on Earth. The impact that created Yarrabubba struck the ancient Yilgarn Craton during a period of Earth history known as the Paleoproterozoic, when the atmosphere contained far less oxygen than today, when complex multicellular life had not yet evolved, and when the continents of the modern world did not yet exist in any recognizable form. The research published on Yarrabubba in 2020, which established its age with unprecedented precision using uranium lead dating of shock recrystallized minerals in the crater's central uplift, produced a finding that went far beyond the dating result itself. The age of the Yarrabubba impact, 2.229 billion years, corresponds within the precision of the dating to one of the most significant transitions in Earth history. The end of a global glaciation event known as a snowball Earth episode, a period when the entire planet was covered in ice from the poles to the equator, the global glaciation ending at approximately the same time as the Yarrabubba impact. The research team that produced the dating result modeled the potential climatic effects of an impact of Yarrabubba's scale striking an ice-covered surface. Their modeling suggested that the impact would have released an enormous quantity of water vapor into the atmosphere almost instantaneously, an amount comparable to what is currently present in the entire atmosphere. Water vapor is a powerful greenhouse gas. The sudden injection of that quantity of water vapor into the atmosphere of a glaciated planet could, the modeling suggested, have been sufficient to trigger the deglaciation that ended the snowball Earth episode. A meteorite may have ended a global ice age. Not definitively established. The correspondence in timing could be coincidental. The modeling is based on assumptions about the impact conditions and the atmospheric response that introduce significant uncertainties. The researchers were careful in their published language about what the correspondence implies versus what it proves. But the possibility that an impact structure sitting in the Western Australian desert is the physical record of the event that ended a global glaciation and allowed the subsequent evolution of complex life on Earth is not a possibility that the coverage the finding received in the scientific media adequately conveyed to the public. It is the most significant finding ever produced from an Australian impact crater. It may be one of the most significant geological findings of the century. Now let us talk about Goss's Bluff in the Northern Territory, because this is where the research produced findings of a completely different character that are equally unexpected. Goss's Bluff, known to the Western Aranda people as Tnarala, is a circular ring of hills approximately 5 kilometers across, rising from the flat desert plain of the Northern Territory approximately 175 kilometers west of Alice Springs. It is immediately recognizable from the air as an impact structure, the circular form of the eroded crater rim producing one of the most visually distinctive landforms in the Australian interior. The impact that created Goss's Bluff occurred approximately 142 million years ago, during the Jurassic period, when Australia was still part of Gondwana and the landscape of Central Australia was very different from what it is today. The original crater was approximately 24 kilometers in diameter. What is visible today as the ring of hills is the central uplift of the original crater, the plug of deeply buried rock that rebounded upward at the moment of impact and that has resisted the erosion that has removed the surrounding crater structure over 142 million years. The geological investigation of Goss's Bluff has been extensive. The impact origin of the structure was confirmed in the 1960s by the identification of shocked quartz and other impact indicators. The age has been established by multiple dating methods. The structure of the original crater has been reconstructed from the preserved geology of the central uplift and the surrounding region. What was not expected from the geological investigation was what the biological surveys found inside the ring. The interior of the Goss's Bluff ring structure is a protected basin, enclosed on all sides by the hill ring and sheltered from the prevailing winds of the surrounding desert. The shelter creates a microclimate inside the ring that is measurably different from the conditions outside it. And inside that sheltered microclimate, the biological community that has developed is significantly more diverse than the surrounding desert. Plant species not found in the surrounding terrain grow inside the ring. Water availability inside the ring, fed by the drainage of the surrounding hill slopes into the enclosed basin, is higher than in the surrounding plain. The biological diversity of the enclosed basin, measured in plant species richness and in the diversity of the animal communities that depend on those plants, is consistently higher than the comparable measurements in the surrounding desert. The impact crater is functioning as a refugium. The geological structure created by the impact 142 million years ago is producing a microclimate in the present that shelters a biological community more diverse than the surrounding environment supports. The Western Aranda traditional knowledge of Tnarala, the dreaming story that describes the crater's origin as the place where a celestial cradle carrying a baby fell from the Milky Way and struck the Earth, encodes an understanding of the structure as a place of particular significance whose origin involved a force coming from above. The correspondence between the traditional description of an object falling from the sky and the physical reality of an impact event, which is precisely an object falling from the sky, is the same kind of correspondence documented at Wolf Creek Crater, at Uluru, and at every other Australian site where traditional knowledge and scientific investigation have been brought into genuine dialogue. The traditional knowledge describes the physical reality accurately. Now let us talk about the Acraman crater in South Australia, because this is where the research produced findings that connected the impact record to the deep history of life on Earth in a way that no one anticipated. The Acraman impact structure in the Gawler Craton of South Australia is one of the largest impact craters in Australia and one of the largest confirmed impact structures in the world. The original crater, formed approximately 590 million years ago at the very end of the Precambrian period, is estimated to have been approximately 90 kilometers in diameter. The impact that created it was an event of extraordinary violence. The Acraman structure is so old and so eroded that there is no topographic expression of the crater at the surface. What remains of it is visible only through the geological record, the shocked minerals and impact metamorphosed rocks that confirm the impact origin of the structure, exposed in the ancient rocks of the Gawler Craton after 590 million years of erosion has removed the overlying material. The age of the Acraman impact is what makes it scientifically extraordinary. 590 million years ago is the end of the Precambrian and the threshold of the Cambrian period, the geological boundary at which the fossil record of complex animal life begins. The Cambrian explosion, the relatively rapid diversification of complex multicellular animal life that produced the basic body plans of virtually all living animal groups in a geologically brief period, occurred within a few tens of millions of years following the Acraman impact. Whether there is a causal relationship between the Acraman impact and the Cambrian explosion of complex life is a question that has been raised by several researchers and that the available evidence does not definitively resolve. The impact would have been a global-scale event, generating tsunamis, releasing enormous quantities of dust and aerosols into the atmosphere, and producing climatic effects that could have significantly disrupted the marine environments in which the Precambrian ancestors of Cambrian animal life were living. The disruption hypothesis for the Cambrian explosion, in which a catastrophic event stressed and reorganized the existing ecosystems in ways that opened ecological space for rapid evolutionary diversification, has been proposed independently of the Acraman impact in various forms. The impact is one candidate for the disrupting event. What the ejecta layer from the Acraman impact has revealed about the biological conditions at the time of impact is one of the more unusual findings in the Acraman research record. The ejecta from the Acraman impact, the material thrown out of the crater at the moment of impact, was distributed across a wide area and is preserved as a distinctive layer in the sedimentary rock of the Flinders Ranges to the east of the impact site. This ejecta layer has been studied in detail because it provides a precisely dated stratigraphic marker in the sedimentary sequence, allowing researchers to correlate rock layers across the region with great precision. Above and below the ejecta layer, in the sedimentary sequences of the Flinders Ranges, the fossil record changes. The biological communities documented above the ejecta layer are different from those documented below it. The difference is not a simple extinction event followed by recovery. It is a reorganization of the biological community, a shift in which groups are present and in which relative abundances, that suggests the impact produced a significant ecological disturbance in the marine environment of this part of Australia at the time. Whether the reorganization of the Flinders Ranges biological community above the Acraman ejecta layer is causally connected to the subsequent Cambrian explosion of complex animal life is not established. It is a correlation that the research has documented and that the interpretation of the deep history of life must account for. Now let us talk about what the smaller and more recently formed craters have revealed. Because the findings from the ancient large structures like Yarrabubba, Gosses Bluff, and Acraman are not the only significant results from the Australian impact record. The Boxhole crater in the Northern Territory, formed approximately 54,000 years ago, is a small structure 170 meters in diameter that sits in the desert country of Central Australia. Its age places its formation within the period of human occupation of the continent. Whether the people living in this part of the Northern Territory at the time of the Boxhole impact witnessed the event is not established, but the proximity of human presence to the time of the impact is within the range that could have produced a direct witnessing event. The meteoritic iron fragments recovered from Boxhole and from the surrounding landscape extend over an area significantly larger than the crater itself, documenting the distribution of impactor material across the landscape at the moment of impact. Analysis of those fragments has contributed to the characterization of the impactor as a medium octahedrite iron meteorite, the same broad class of impactor as at Wolf Creek, providing comparative data for the understanding of iron meteorite impacts in the Australian environment. The Liverpool crater in the Northern Territory, formed approximately 150 million years ago, is a structure approximately 1.6 kilometers in diameter that sits within what is now Arnhem Land. The significance of the Liverpool crater in the context of this discussion is not primarily geological. It is the relationship between the impact structure and the traditional knowledge of the Yalengu people whose country includes the crater. The Yalengu traditional knowledge of the Liverpool crater encodes an understanding of the site as a place of particular spiritual power whose significance predates any European knowledge of the structure's existence. The Yalengu engagement with the landscape of Arnhem Land extends back to the earliest period of human presence in the region. The traditional knowledge of the Liverpool crater, whatever its specific content, represents the product of engagement with this site across that entire span. The collaboration between Yalengu knowledge holders and the geologists who have worked at the Liverpool crater site, while limited by the constraints that apply to research in Arnhem Land generally, has produced the same pattern of correspondence documented at other Australian impact sites. The traditional knowledge describes the site in terms that the geological investigation independently confirms as accurate in their essential character. The Henbury meteorite craters in the Northern Territory are a cluster of 12 impact structures formed by the breakup and fragmentation of a single iron meteorite in the atmosphere approximately 4,200 years ago, within the historical period of human civilization globally and well within the span of human presence in Central Australia. The Aranda people, whose traditional country includes the Henbury craters, have maintained knowledge of the site that includes accounts of fire that came from the sun and struck the earth at this location. The accounts describe an event whose visual character, a fireball breaking into multiple pieces and striking the ground in a pattern corresponding to the crater cluster's distribution, is consistent with the fragmentation of a meteorite in the atmosphere and the subsequent impact of the fragments across the landscape. Fire from the sun. Breaking apart. Striking the earth in multiple places. An oral tradition describing a meteorite fragmentation event, maintained across approximately 4,200 years of transmission. The preservation of specific observed events in oral traditions across timescales of thousands of years is not hypothetical in the Australian context. The research on Australian Aboriginal accounts of sea level changes occurring at the end of the last glacial maximum, published in 2020 by researchers including Dr. Nick Reed and Patrick Nunn, documented that traditional knowledge across multiple Australian coastal communities accurately describes the geography of the coastline as it existed before sea levels rose to their current position, in some cases more than 7,000 years ago. The research demonstrated that Australian oral traditions have the capacity to preserve accurate geographical information across timescales significantly longer than most Western scientific frameworks assume possible. The Henbury account of fire from the sun striking the earth in multiple places is entirely consistent with that demonstrated capacity for long-term oral preservation of witnessed events. 4,200 years ago. Remembered accurately. Maintained intact across 4,000 years of transmission. Now let us talk about what the collective findings from the Australian impact record mean for understanding this continent's role in the broader story of life on Earth. The Yarrabubba impact potentially ending a snowball Earth glaciation and enabling the subsequent evolution of complex life. The Acraman impact at the threshold of the Cambrian explosion, associated with a reorganization of the biological community in the fossil record of the Flinders Ranges. The Gosses Bluff crater functioning as a biological refugium across 142 million years of subsequent geological history. The Henbury craters remembered in oral tradition for 4,200 years. The Wolf Creek crater possibly witnessed by the ancestors of the Jara people and encoded in their dreaming story of Candamallo. Each of these findings, from craters across different parts of the continent, in different geological settings, from different periods in geological and human history, adds to a picture of Australia's impact record as something more than a geological curiosity. It is a record of the events that shaped the history of life on this planet, preserved in the ancient stable surface of the most geologically conservative continent on Earth, and encoded in the knowledge systems of the people who have inhabited that continent across the full span of modern human history. The impacts happened everywhere. Australia kept the evidence. And the people who have been here since before any other human tradition began to record history kept the memory. Both forms of keeping, the geological and the cultural, are telling the same story. The scientific research that is assembling that story from the physical evidence in the craters themselves has produced findings that are still being integrated into the broader understanding of Earth history, life history, and human history. The craters are still there. The oral traditions are still maintained. And the research that is bringing the two into dialogue is still in its early stages. What lies inside Australia's ancient meteor craters is the history of this planet written in shock minerals and shattered rock, remembered in fire stories and dreaming narratives, and studied with instruments that are only now sophisticated enough to read what the ancient surface of the oldest continent has been preserving since the beginning of complex life. If this changed how you think about Australia's place in the story of life on Earth, leave a comment below and subscribe for more Australian history and science that most people were never properly taught.